Hey everybody, welcome in to Guerilla Hockey with JJ and Jesse. Jesse on his way back from a monster of a travel stretch?
Road trip.
Thank you. Of course, Evan Rawal here to correct my English and clean up any mistakes. Evan, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you. I was on the start of that road trip, and that feels like it was a month ago. So
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
I know Jesse finds solace in being in Florida for 2 games of that road trip, so I know he's not, totally burnt out just yet, but
Well,
probably needs a day or two to just settle in at home and, maybe drink some vitamin C and whatnot.
He probably got home and saw the weather today and just was like,
Cried.
no.
He cried. He's like, yesterday I was by the water in Tampa Bay. Now I'm in 30-degree weather. But, yeah, let's get into some Avalanche hockey. Not the greatest road trip. But I also don't find it time to panic or really get down on the team. I think it was, we always talk about those scheduled losses that are intermittent throughout a schedule year. This just felt like a road trip that was meant to be difficult for the Avalanche. It was meant to test them a little bit, meant to present a little bit of adversity because that bye week, the AllStar break, then coming into a road trip like this, it just felt like they were set up to struggle here. So I know you want to see wins out of the team. I know you want to see more than 3 points in 12. But I also think, home cooking's right around the corner. They could put this one behind them and move on with the year.
Yeah, they're going to have to put it behind them. They really have no choice. It was a tough road trip. It was weird scheduling where they went to Florida, and then they went to Washington, then they go back to Florida. But there's no really excuses because travel on the East Coast is not as bad as it is out here because you're all in the same time zone. But, yeah, it was a tough road trip. A lot of games, long time away from your house, but just on the ice, they had periods of good play, moments of good play, and then they would just fall apart. And it's the guys that you maybe wouldn't expect to make mistakes that are making some pretty big mistakes right now, and that's kind of what hurts the most.
Yeah, and I feel like, I look back to that last game that we had here at home against the LA Kings right before the break, and what made that such a great game from the Avalanche was that it was well-rounded. All aspects of their game were playing well, from goaltending to special teams, offensive side, the defensive side. Here, during this stretch, it doesn't feel like everything's clicking. It almost feels like only 1 or 2 things are popping off and the other things are struggling. So they're not able to really put that complete game together, in different variations throughout this road trip. I also, though, I look at that last game against Tampa Bay, and usually on the last game of a road trip, you know me, Evan, I like to gamble here and there on the NHL, right? And I love to find a team that's on the last game of a long road trip because usually they're out of gas, they get pummeled. I'm pretty pleasantly surprised by the way the Avalanche fought throughout that game. I know the end kind of got away from them, as to be expected, but for the rest of the game, I felt like they were very much in it. They were scratching and clawing. They had every excuse with Annunen in net to kind of fall apart defensively, and they didn't. So I think that right there is a little something to hang their hat on as they head their way back to Ball Arena.
I almost think that's why they put Annunen in net, is to say, okay, you guys got to buckle down. And I don't know if they necessarily did that, but I feel like that's kind of why they put Annunen in there, to say, hey, can you kind of help shelter our young goaltender here? But yeah, I don't know if effort was really as much the issue as much as just dumb mistakes is what's killing them, because they battled. Tampa's a good team. They played some good teams on this road trip. I think that we kind of need to mention that they did play some. Florida looks like an absolute wagon right now.
They look great, and they look better than last year, I would say. Right?
I thought they were a bit of a fluke last year, and now I'm like, okay, they look for real. They might be the best team in the East. So
wow, that's quite the statement.
They did play some really good teams. The effort was mostly there, but it was just everyone was disconnected. Nobody was on the same page a lot of the time, and it was just mistakes that at this point of the year you probably shouldn't be making because you kind of know what's expected of you.
Yeah, that again, going back to that last LA game, the last time we really got to talk to any of these guys and see anyone, I remember Jared Bednar saying the rest of the year from here on out is more about cleaning up the details, right? We've gotten to a point where we're on the same page. Everybody understands the structure. Everybody understands their responsibilities and their roles. From here, it's about cleaning up the details. And I think right there at that first road trip, as you pointed out, there's a lot of details that need to be addressed and need to be cleaned up. But I asked Jesse, who of course was on the road, hasn't missed a minute of Avalanche hockey, Just what the room's feeling like, because again, it's been so long since we've seen these guys. I love to go in there and just read the room, read the body language, read the energy. So I'm curious with Jesse what that's like, and he said that everybody seems to be still in a good mood, right? The vibes are still high. Nobody's really getting down on themselves, because I think even times during, what was it, maybe December, November, we'd walk into that room and you could feel the negativity in there. You could feel them being upset after a loss. I know we haven't seen many losses at home, but when we do, you can really, it's uncomfortable in there. You can feel it, but it doesn't feel like they're getting down on themselves right now. Still seems like there's positivity in the room, and I think for good reason, right? I know it's a tough stretch, and I feel like the Avalanche typically have these tough stretches. It's right around now that they turn it on and really go on a run, and if you look at March's calendar and the lineup of games that the Avalanche have ahead, there's a lot of opportunity to make up ground, to make up for what they've done this month. So I'm just going to chalk it up as a bad road trip, dust your hands off of it, and just move ahead.
They, I mean, the reason why they're not panicking is because it's a veteran team that's won. They've had a lot of guys that have won before. They know that it's a long regular season. You're going to have rough stretches. They do have to make up some ground here, because now they're at the point where they've played more games than everyone else, and now this
Isn't that weird too? Usually the Avalanche are the other side of it.
I think Winnipeg's played like 4 less games than them, so this road trip hurts in the sense that they had a chance to kind of, even one more win would have just been huge. We talked about it last week. They needed 2 wins out of the last 3. They only got 1, so it really hurts this road trip, because now Dallas has kind of created a little bit of a gap there, and they still have a game in hand. And then you have Winnipeg, who's, I think, 1 point behind with 4 games in hand. So it hurts in that sense, but there's still plenty of season left. And I think, this road trip did kind of point out the issues that this team has, that, when McKinnon's not going, that they don't necessarily have the depth behind them to push them over the top. And yeah, I guess we're closing in on the trade deadline. Everyone is looking for something to happen there, but just that's something that was kind of on display, and we kind of talked about that with matchups, that on the road the other team gets the matchup and they can kind of dictate what they want to do.
Yeah, and some people are kind of figuring out a way to stop McKinnon. It's interesting, seeing the McKinnon versus Kucherov matchup last night, because how fun has it been the last little while seeing the race? Kucherov gets ahead, McKinnon gets ahead, Kucherov gets ahead. Well, it feels like Kucherov's pulling away a little bit because McKinnon kind of slowing down a little bit. But I think we'll look back at this time and just be like, man, remember how fun it was watching the McKinnon-Kucherov race? I was talking to somebody recently who likened it to the Sammy Sosa Mark McGuire home run race of 1998, I think it was.
Yeah.
Kind of felt like that for a second, but now it's kind of cooled off a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we know McKinnon's superhuman at home, so it'll probably flip-flop a little bit more. His face had a rough road trip, unfortunately.
Yeah, his face. And was it last year or 2 years ago when he cracked his nose with his own stick? Remember that? He was making a hit on somebody.
I don't remember when that was, though.
And then we saw him slam his chin earlier in this road trip. I mean, his face is just taking a beating.
That looked bad last night.
It did. That looked terrible. And well, luckily the visor was there to help, mitigate some of that. But the look on his face when he hit the ice, right? I think that was just so perfectly Nathan McKinnon, right? I got a nose that's pointing the wrong direction. I've got blood on my face, but I still have this focused look like I'm ready to try to help my team win this matchup in mid-February.
2 minutes later, he was back.
Yeah, interesting
Put
stuff.
a different visor on me. I'll go out there. His face was still blue. That was crazy.
Yeah, that was wild. And, man, Nathan McKinnon's face just...
Hey, that's hockey, I guess.
Part of the game, right?
Yeah.
At least he's still got his teeth.
Does he? I guess I didn't look.
I mean, pretty sure, right?
I guess
we
we
have no
didn't
missing teeth. Like, I remember EJ, Miles Wood. Like, you could see that. That stands out. I mean, maybe some of them are fake.
I don't know.
Is that what you're
I was
implying?
just saying last night. I don't know if any teeth got knocked out. I didn't look close enough. Distracted by the visor.
Yeah,
the big visor.
That was huge. But what else are you gonna do, right? NHL players aren't gonna go to a cage. They're not gonna go to a bubble. They're gonna. That's the maximum protection. Just an extra maybe inch of visor is all they're willing to really negotiate with.
Kucherov is he's so good. I don't know. They had power plays last night where it's like, how did they not score? Like, he just directs things so well. It's, it is. I know everyone wants McKinnon to win the Hart Trophy, but it's just fun to watch. Like a guy like that who's at the top of his game, who's just playing out of this world.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard from even the players that they love watching Kucherov, right? I remember when Tampa Bay was coming into town the first go around, and we were talking to some of the guys, and McKinnon, Rantanen, we're talking about how good Kucherov is at maybe no-look passes on the power play. And then a couple games later, I saw Mikko Rantanen really working on his no-look passes on the power play. And I'm like, he's just trying to be like Nikita Kucherov. So to sit there for them and actually see Nikita Kucherov has to be fun, but it also has to be a challenge. Maybe a little bit in their head, like, oh, we got to stop a guy like Nikita Kucherov with our third-string goalie, and that's going to be a challenge. Nikita Kucherov buries 2. Almost gets the hat trick there on the empty net, but that's just a fun game to watch. I know the result wasn't in the Avalanche's favor, but they were in that game till the end. They even had a lead for a second, and just watching guys like Kucherov, McKinnon go head-to-head, I mean, it's a treat from the NHL for sure.
Had the lead for a second, was actually almost accurate. It was 20 seconds, unfortunately. But, yeah, it was a fun game to watch, watching the best players. And we don't get to see Kucherov all the time, so it's just fun to see.
Right, exactly. Even Stamkos is kind of fun to watch here and there. And, of course, Vasilevsky. I was actually pretty shocked.
Hair. They showed his headshot before. I was like, what's going on with
There's this hilarious old painting from, like, the Renaissance that looks just like Andrei Vasilevsky. I'll have to put it out there for you.
I could see that.
It's hilarious. But, yeah, the Avalanche putting up 3 on Andrei Vasilevsky, I even thought that was quite the accomplishment on the last night of the road trip. But looking at the home and road splits, Evan, Avalanche have 16 home games remaining. So far, they've won 80% of their home games at 20-5. So let's just assume they win 75% of the remaining home games. That puts them at about 11, 12 more wins just at home. Which
good math.
Thank you.
Good math.
Thank you. I'm not doing this on the spot,
okay.
Just so you know. This was premeditated. I can't do math this quickly. But even with just those home wins, that puts them right about the mid-90s range as far as points. Gather a couple road wins. I mean, they're easily going to be in the 105 range. So, again, yes, it's been a slip up from the Avalanche, but nothing to sweat. Everything's still A-OK, heading the right direction. It's just a matter of whether or not they take that Central Division, right?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that based off of the splits that the Avalanche have with road and home, that home ice advantage might really matter to them in the first round. Like last year, they were a good road team. So them going into Seattle, I think, they were worse at home in the playoffs than they were on the road, it seemed like. So them getting that home ice advantage, I think, is really going to matter. And that's kind of what hurts on this road trip is you give up a little of that points. But, yeah, I mean, they have to take care of business at home, like they have all season, but they got to figure out. I don't think they have that many big road trips left. I think it's like maybe 2. They got a big 4-game trip after the trade deadline, but they just got to figure out how to play on the road and what kind of works for them to have success.
What do you read into that? What does that tell you about a team that kind of differs so much, right? I mean, do you look anything into it, or do you kind of say, hey, maybe a team that struggles on the road and is fine at home just isn't quite built to be the contender, the favorite that you might expect? Because, hey, if you're struggling that much on the road, I think that tells you some negative things about your team. What do you look into that?
Yeah, I think it's strange because they have been a good road team, and I mean, they broke the record for the consecutive road victories at the start of the year, and then it's just really fallen apart. So, to me, it does point to kind of the depth issues that they have right now, where things just haven't worked out the way that they had initially planned. You have a guy like Miles Wood who's been awesome this year, but he's not a second-line player, and he's playing essentially a second-line role right now. So it's just those things just get magnified on the road, and teams can expose that when they have matchups and they have the control on the home and they have the home ice. They have their fans in the building. Things like that can matter a little bit. So at home, the Avs control the pace. They know how to play in their own building. They have the altitude effect. Like, they just know how to win in Colorado, and that's just something they got to figure out down the stretch is how do we play on the road? Can we carry that over onto the road?
So, in your eyes, we've heard in years past Jared Bednar being like, we're not looking at any accolades for the team. We don't really care about the Central Division. But then all of a sudden they put themselves right in the race for the Central Division, and then you see them caring about it, right? You see them really fighting down the stretch to pull off some wins, really playing all the top guys, those crazy minutes that Jared Bednar likes to play them because they're really fighting for those victories. They do care about the Central Division. How about you? How much stock do you put in to the Avalanche needing that Central Division victory to A, have the home ice advantage, and B, get a little easier matchup in that first round?
Well, I mean, they're going to have to go through Dallas or Winnipeg no matter what to get to the finals if they want to get there. So if they had a better road record, like if they were just even slightly better on the road, I probably wouldn't care so much about the Central Division. Like it would be the Tampa thing with the last few years, like just get in, we know how to win. And maybe they still can flip that switch when they get in the playoffs, but that's why I think it matters is that there is such a discrepancy in how they play at home and on the road. So that's really the only thing. Like under any other circumstance, I probably just wouldn't care. I'd just say get in, and maybe even still, like just get in and see what happens because it's so tightly bunched at the top in the West that I don't know if anyone is really separating themselves from the pack.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with that. It feels different this year. I'm with you. Normally, I'm just like, just get in. But I think if they just get in and have to face a team like Winnipeg in the first round and lose, everybody's hair is going to be on fire, and everybody's going to consider it a failure. If they can just squeak into that second round and maybe lose to a Winnipeg or a Dallas in that second round, I think we all feel a little bit better about it. I think, just getting deeper into the playoffs is a nice consolation if they don't make it all the way. So,
well, they really pushed for that Central Division title last year. Like they made a point down the stretch to say, "Hey, we want this. We want home ice advantage." And then what happened in round one?
Right.
So it's not a guarantee of anything, but you would always just prefer to be at home more than on the road in the playoffs.
Sure. So I don't want to sit here and just make excuses and say, oh, everything's okay for the Avalanche. Yeah, they had a terrible road trip, but everything's glitters and sparkles. I do want to stay on the positive side and look at the bigger picture, but I think there's also negatives to be talked about too, right? So I don't want everybody out there being like, these guys are just staying positive. They're not criticizing anything. The criticism will come. But first, I want to look at what positives we can take away from this road trip, because I know the points and the lack of points is definitely something that's bothering people right now. But let's keep everybody's heads where they need to be and just realize that things aren't so terrible as they're making them out to be. So first positive I kind of wanted to touch on, Evan, from this road trip is, at first, you and I last week were discussing the lack of forward scoring. It feels like, at least since our last podcast, I know they got shut out in Florida, but Washington and Tampa Bay, a couple forwards were able to contribute on the score sheet. We saw Arturi Lehkonen wake up a little bit. Not only wake up, but find his form. I think we're starting to see the Arturi Lehkonen that we're used to. Of course, he needed a little bit of runway to come back from that injury. Ross Colton gets on the score sheet as well.
A center.
Yeah,
a center scored a goal.
Yeah, so your stat is over with. But yeah, it feels like the forward group may be waking up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Lehkonen waking up is big because he's a huge part of what they want to do beyond that top line. And we even saw on the trip that he is probably going to be switching in and out of that top line down the stretch, maybe even, permanently at some point. But it's just him getting back to being the Lehkonen that we know. And I can't imagine coming back from essentially a broken neck. Like, that sounds like that's what he had. And coming back and playing the way that he does, it cannot be easy. Like, mentally, like physically you can feel fine, but there's got to be something mentally there where you're 100%. Like, okay, I gotta get over this. And that, I don't think that's just going to come right away. Like, and it took him, I would say, about 2 weeks to kind of get back into form. But yeah, it was great to see him chip in. That pass to Rantanen was very wow-worthy, as Rantanen said. But and then to get Colton chipping in offensively, like, Colton's numbers are not, like, he's on pace for career highs, I think, in pretty much everything except for goals. I think he's already set a career high in assists. So there's good things there. He's still being, I think, stretched a little bit too far, but I mean, there are positives to take from this trip. The other one I was going to say is Bowen Byrum kind of woke up a little bit offensively. Defensively, still some issues we saw last night, but the problem with him all year has been, I guess I would say over the last month, 2 months, is that he's not been getting involved offensively. And then I saw it a little bit in Florida. We saw it a lot in Washington. Then we saw it again last night in Tampa. So that's something they need down the stretch, because he is kind of that wild card on this team where teams, it's hard, you can try to I guess, defend a Cale Makar on the first pair. But when you have a Bowen Byrum on the third pair who can do that too, that's very difficult for some teams to defend.
Yeah, last week you were pointing out how it feels like forever since you've seen Bowen Byrum rush the puck up or even really get engaged in the offense. Both the goals he scored last night right next to the crease, or even one I think was in the crease because he was the only one that found the puck. How funny is that, too?
That.
Yeah, it's the same building, just like the Cup run when Nazem Kadri scored and Bowen Byrum was the only one that saw it. Last night, the puck was loose.
He knows.
Vasilevsky thought he had it frozen. Bowen Byrum saw it.
Even in Washington, he had his chance like in the slot. He just drifted down in the slot. So it's just that's how he, when he's at the top of his game, that's how he needs to play. So that's just, I would say, an encouraging sign from that road trip.
With that, I think Devon Taves also was on the score sheet in the last couple games. So, you and I both pointed out both Bowen Byrum and Devon Taves need to kind of wake up from an offensive standpoint, and I think they've done just that. So I'm with you. Even the defensive contributions are some positives.
Yeah, they got to focus on their end now. But yeah, I would say that's a positive. And then I think we had talked about it before, but I think outside of that Carolina game, it was a pretty good road trip for Alexander Georgiev, where I think he played pretty well, I would say.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Like I said, it doesn't feel like the whole team was clicking. Every aspect of the game was clicking for the team. But once it starts again and Alexander Georgiev's playing the way he has been, I think the sky's the limit for this group, right? And so, yeah, I'm with you. Alexander Georgiev seems to have refound his confidence, refound his game a little bit. If the rest of the team can follow suit, I think we're in for a solid stretch run here to the playoffs.
They just got to put it together. They're having trouble putting everything together.
Right. Almost the full 60 argument again, right? Something I've been complaining about for years now. So, yeah, Georgiev has been fantastic. Still not confident on the backup spot, but we touched on that already a little bit.
I thought Annan actually played decently last night. He still has the thing where he'll make a save and he's like, where's the puck?
Right. Or the Kucherov goal, granted he was left all alone to score that, or one of the Kucherov goals. What happened with Annanen is he almost had the right idea, right? He was down in his butterfly, tries to go across his crease to stop that shot from Kucherov, but his foot slipped out from underneath him. He went to push, and that right foot just slid out, so that's why he ended up having to fall on his side. But that's the technical side of the game that drives me crazy about Annanen. Like, that's the stuff I think if Prosvetov's in net, he slides across no problem because that's his strength. Annanen has to resort to laying on his side and getting scored on. Not blaming him for it because, again, Kucherov all alone by a mile, so naturally he's going to score that backdoor tap in.
That's the goalie stuff I would not notice. And actually, Prosvetov went down, and he's been playing really well in the AHL. So I almost wonder if they're going to try to like flip flop these guys a little bit down the stretch here.
I imagine you have to, like
until they,
replace.
There have been rumors going around, so that until they find maybe someone they can trust behind.
Yeah, but everybody keeping an eye on what the Avalanche are going to do from the goalie standpoint, right? That's why the rumors started swirling around. With the positives, I think Mikko Rantanen's game can be looked at as a positive. Much like Bowen Byrum and even Alexander Georgiev, I think that road trip started pretty ugly for Mikko Rantanen. By the end of it, you really saw him getting more engaged in the offense, and that's what it was. It wasn't ugly play. It wasn't, wow, Mikko Rantanen's playing terrible. I just felt like he had a hard time really getting engaged in that offense. Really, I don't know, just having that effort meter be at 110% for him. And with the goal to Bowen Byrum, the vision, I loved that from Mikko Rantanen. The goal from the assist from Artturi Lehkonen, obviously he just has to put that home, but putting himself in the right position for Artturi Lehkonen to find him, again, I just think he's getting more engaged, and I like the direction, the trajectory of Mikko Rantanen here for the near future.
Yeah, still, I would say still a lot more to give from Rantanen, but those plays like the pass to Byrum, those are the elite plays that, sometimes I would say we take for granted because he's so good and he makes some things look very casual. Like even the finish on the Lehkonen goal, it's like, oh, it's a through legs pass. He kind of like that was a perfect shot. Like that's just how talented he is, and that's kind of what frustrates people is that you want to see it more consistently, and he's capable of dominating more, like he did last year when I would say he was probably their MVP. It's
kind of been all season long that we're not seeing last year's Mikko Rantanen. Yeah, he's still contributing, he's still there, but there's something just not as effective about him this year. any idea what it
Yeah,
could be.
it's tough to say. He's mentioned multiple times like that last year was a real grind for him, and I almost wonder if he was one of the few guys who played in every single game last year. He's played, I think, every single game again this year. I almost wonder if he's one guy where this fatigue has really kind of impacted him, and where he's trying to, I think I talked about it last week, where he's trying to pace himself through the regular season to be ready for the playoffs. And now, if you do that, I can't say for sure if he's doing that. That's just something I'm, spitballing here. But if you do something like that, you obviously got to be ready when the playoffs go. But it's just something I've noticed because I've heard him say multiple times about how it's been a grind over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and then we all remember Arturi Lekkonen's dad's comments, right? Which he shot down, but there has to be a grain of truth behind it, right? I don't think Arturi Lekkonen's dad just makes that up for no reason. There has to be something that instigated him to say that. So whether it was Mikko Rantanen just vocalizing, hey, I'm a little bit more exhausted this year than years past, or, like you're saying, he's just having a rougher go of it. Maybe there's something to it, but I feel like he's getting through it, and now's the time to turn it on. So as long as he turns it on now, I think everybody can be okay with Mikko Rantanen's season.
Yeah.
Looking at the negatives now from the road trip, I'm going to start with something you've already brought up, and that's cleaning up the defensive side of the game, right? A lot of defensive errors. So from your point of view, your perspective, your expert opinion, Evan, what needs to be cleaned up? What's going wrong in the defensive zone that the Avalanche really got to address?
It's just simple mistakes. Like on that Kucherov goal, the game-winning goal, they have coverage. Ross Colton kind of switches off from Stamkos to Kucherov, and he blocks the shot. But the problem is that
He's thinking
he
offense.
leaves.
He's thinking offense.
He's thinking, we're gone.
Yep.
And he even sees Stamkos get the puck, and he still kind of floats into the neutral zone. But that's his guy. It's Kucherov, that's the wrong guy to leave wide open. And that's just a simple mistake. And then you look at the second goal, and I'm just thinking back, it's Taves, Makar, McKinnon just getting outworked and beaten by the second line on the Lightning. And those are, when I see moments like that, I'm like, is that a moment where just the heavy minutes are kind of getting into these guys a little bit? And then obviously at the end of a long road trip too. But I was looking the numbers up last year. Makar last year was on the ice 60 games. He was on the ice for 38 5-on-5 goals against. He's played 50 games this year. He's already been on the ice for 42 goals against.
Wow.
So, and goaltending, like the save percentage that the Avs had last year and this year is night and day in not a good way. So that plays a role in it. But I do feel like there's been a pretty big dip in Makar's defensive play this year, where he's had more noticeable blips, especially around his net, than years past, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that from the whole defensive group. I think there's a confidence that they have with the puck that maybe they're giving themselves a little bit extra time to do something with it, and ultimately doing something wrong with it. I think this is, in my mind, Devon Taves has done this more than anyone. He just wants to do something with the puck that's the smart play, but in kind of thinking about it and trying extra hard to make that smart play, he turns it over or gives it to a guy that doesn't catch the pass, and again it's on the other team's stick. Where like yesterday, Jack Johnson, he's such a safe player, right? I mean, he's such a stay-at-home, don't make yourself be noticed. There was a face-off win in the defensive zone to him yesterday, and what does he do? He just sends it off the glass, and it was an icing ultimately. But Jack Johnson's like, I am not making a terrible play with this puck. So yeah, a little bit more of that. I think safer decision making from the defensive group, I think, can really benefit them, because they're just maybe overcomplicating a pinch, trying too hard to find that outlet pass rather than just making the right play with it.
And defense is not all about defensemen. I have to I'll defend the defenseman here a little bit too, because like when Taves went on that, he had his little rant. I think that was in December about a disconnect. Some guys think they're playing better. I think that was about a disconnect between forwards and defensemen, where there's too big of a gap. They're not getting enough help in the defensive zone on the breakout, things like that. So the forwards definitely need to be better. I think Nate needs to be better defensively.
Yeah,
a lot of those guys need to be better defensively.
I would agree with the Nate thing. I feel like, especially, was it the Washington game? There were a few goals where Nathan McKinnon, I could point directly at I guess, missing his responsibility there. So, no, I hear you. I mean, there's a lot of expectations from those guys on the offensive zone side of things. I think they need to raise their own expectations in the defensive end. especially when you're getting that much ice.
I just remember Makar. It was whenever they went to Toronto when, he's over a point a game and they're asking him how his season. He's like, yeah, it's been pretty average so far. And I think he's a very self-aware person where he understands, like, hey, I'm probably not playing the way I want to play defensively. And even offensively, I would say he hasn't quite had the burst he's had in previous years, but it does feel like they're still, like, as much as they've probably carried this team, like, there's probably, especially after this road trip, they can give a little bit more on both ends of the ice, I would say.
And I think that message in the room is healthy, right? I think Jared Bednar definitely puts that in these guys' heads, because how many times have we talked to them after a win? And they're like, yeah, we won, but I think, we've definitely had better games. Or, they're just not fully satisfied with a lot of areas of their game, even after something spectacular, right? We've even heard from Nathan McKinnon. He'll pop off for a few goals and still not be 100% okay with the way the team played. So
the bar is very high in that locker room, and that's a very good thing. Like, that's why I think Avs fans probably shouldn't worry, because these guys know, like, what's wrong. Like, they're not just oblivious to everything. They know that they're probably not playing their best, but that's why, there's no panic in that room, because they're veterans. They've done this before, and they're elite players, and they can get out of this. So
I think one thing that's really going to help them get out of this is re-resurrecting that power play.
Yeah.
I heard a stat the other day, the Avalanche have the most power plays in the league, which is not crazy to think because they have the puck a lot. They're really fast, hard for teams to catch up to them. But when the power play is just frozen and isn't contributing much, it's really a detriment to the team, because if you're the team in the NHL that's getting the most power plays, you need to be the team in the NHL that's scoring the most power play goals, in my opinion, especially with weaponry that the Avalanche have. So they got to figure out that power play a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what. I mean, putting Val Nichushkin back on it would be my ideal fix, but obviously with no update on Val Nichushkin, they don't have that option for the foreseeable future. So something's got to give there. Something's got to be figured out, because at the beginning of the season, that power play was my favorite thing about this team. Now suddenly it's become just a very blah part of it.
Even for all of January, it was dominant. So whatever, that break pretty much killed any momentum they had. They did, it started the trip with Ross Colton in that spot, and then they switched to Lehkonen. And obviously we know they'd prefer to have Nichushkin there, who was just scoring power play goals at will for a long time. So, it does. It did look stagnant through most of the trip, and even last night they get the power play goal, but I think it came literally
like 2
with
seconds.
like 1 second left, so it took the whole time. So it's a momentum killer. I would say it probably cost them a point or two at least on this trip because of how those early games went.
With that, I think big part of the power play is Cale Makar, right? And we've really seen his contribution offensively slow down. And there was a stretch there in December where he was popping off, right? He was getting 4 points, 5 points in a night. And then all of a sudden he went on this little lull. And you're like, all right, any night now he's gonna figure it out again. He did, and then now we're back into a lull. So a little bit of streakiness coming out of Cale Makar, which I think is something we're not used to.
Yeah, he's having a little bit more trouble, I would say, getting a shot through. Maybe teams are defending a little bit differently, because that was the play when Nichushkin was there. It was just Makar floated through, and Val's going to either deflect it or just the goalie's not going to see the puck.
Yeah, he was deflecting pucks at a rate I'd never seen from him before, Val Nichushkin.
So we know Cale's really good. I just think teams are adjusting a little bit on this road trip, so that the Avs will have to make some sort of adjustment here. And sometimes we see when Nate will flip-flop with him, and that's maybe something that they can try moving forward.
This might be a silly thing to say, but I look at the AllStar skills competition and how Cale Makar was in the running for winning it all the way to the very end, right? And at the end, he gets interviewed. He's just sweating. He's gassed. He's breathing deeply. I don't know if that AllStar break was as much of a break for Cale Makar as it needed to be. And not saying that that's why he's playing terribly, because, he's a fit professional athlete. Shouldn't bother him. But maybe a little bit more of a break would have been beneficial for a guy like that, as we know he's been nursing an injury all year long as well.
Yeah, I think all those guys would have preferred a break. Maybe it was good for Georgiev to go, because he seems to have gotten a boost there. But, I talked to Rantanen before the trip or before the break, and I was like, hey, I know you're still going to the All-Star game, but is it really that intense, like, and he's like, no, it's not that bad, because you're only doing, at that point you were only doing like one event, and then you played like 10 minutes in the 3-on-3 game, so it's not that bad. But when Nate and Kale are doing the whole skills competition
and fighting to win it, right? They didn't give a Kucherov level effort.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's tough to say. Obviously, you would prefer to get those guys a break, but they're the best players in the world. They're probably used to they're going to expect to go every year, so you can't really expect that at this point. And next year it's going to be the Olympics or the Four Nations tournament or whatever, so it's not going to change. So, yeah. Everyone would have, what was that, the let Kale rest was the whole thing before going in?
Yeah.
Not going to happen. People are going to vote that guy into the All-Star game.
And then look what he does. He was entertaining, right? People want to see more of Cale Makar if he's going up against Connor McDavid for almost winning the skills competition. But here, I don't know, for those people watching on YouTube, we've got some pretty nice All-Star memorabilia here that Jesse brought us back. Cool stuff on the set. When did the stick fall?
I don't know. Just leave it there.
All right.
I didn't even notice it.
I'll put this puck here. Finally, Evan, I don't think we have a super long podcast today, so we could start wrapping it up.
Are we done with the negatives?
Yeah, we're done with the negatives. We're done with positive. We're done with the negatives. Right now, I want to talk about your Cal Ritchie piece on Colorado Hockey Now. Exclusive to you, which I think is awesome. Obviously, you got to do the legwork to organize that, so props to you for getting that. Was it difficult to get a guy like that? I mean, I know with the Avalanche, you just go straight to Brendan and say, hey, I'd like to talk to this guy. He makes it happen. How do you get a guy like that?
Like, PR was great. It was just a matter of Oshawa's playing like every other night right now, so it was a matter of just finding a time with him, and we finally were able to connect. But, yeah, it was great talking to him. You can read it on Colorado Hockey Now. He's having just a monster season in the OHL, the type of season where you're like, hey, should this guy, like, I know the team's going all in right now. They should be looking to win the cup, but do you want to trade a piece like this when you know that maybe he could help in the next year or two potentially and be a cheap player for the salary cap? But, yeah, I learned a lot about just how nasty the shoulder injury was he was dealing with last year in the OHL during his draft year. And you kind of learn that, he could take – if he would have missed time during his draft year, how would that have hurt his stock rather than playing through and maybe not playing as well as he could have if he was healthy? So it's just a tough decision there. And then he also talked about Andrew Cogliano helped him through his rehab and got him in touch with the right people in Toronto, because Cogliano knows everyone apparently.
Yeah, he just is a teammate, right? He helps everybody in every facet of their game. It's funny that everybody always brings up Andrew Cogliano. The things that are coming to my mind is Nathan MacKinnon gives him a lot of credit for helping Nathan MacKinnon learn to be a better leader. Darren Helm says Andrew Cogliano is the reason he gave it that last year. Andrew Cogliano talked him into it, and now this.
Maybe didn't like. Maybe he regretted that a little bit because he was hurt the whole year.
Just shaking his fist at Andrew Cogliano from the massage room.
Yeah, and then you got Parise. I don't know if that was
you're right.
But I mean, yeah, Cogliano knows everyone, helped him get in touch with the right people to rehab his shoulder, and then. A lot is made of Nathan MacKinnon's diet and things like that, but now we're kind of learning that the younger generation looks at that and is like, oh, maybe I should be doing that because it's going to help me. And he talked to me a little bit about how Nate's diet, reading about that made him say, I'm going to get my blood tested, I'm going to get a nutritionist, and then Nate does the thing where he rides the bike 25 minutes after every game. Now he's going to try to do that. So it's just like that's kind of how Nate is, where he's the lead by example. And it's just fascinating to see these younger players maybe, opening their eyes to that. I'd be like, oh, if that's the edge I can get, then I'm going to take it.
Here's a weird little tidbit that, only my weird brain notices in that locker room. But in years past, I remember going in there after a practice or after a game, and they would have, they'd have water, of course, out of a water bottle. And they would also have maybe a protein shake in the same water bottle, right? These plastic water bottles. Now with all the conversation around microplastics and not drinking out of plastic bottles, I've noticed the entire team doesn't have plastic bottles anymore at their stalls. They have these glass water bottles for, whenever they want to drink water post-game, post-practice. They've switched to glass. So it's a minor detail, but I wonder if, this thought process, the taking care of the body, the making sure, you're only putting good things, I wonder if that's the reason for the decision making, because I'm sure that you're not like, oh wow, Aquafina water is so much worse than Spring Valley water, right? But I think it has maybe something to do with glass versus plastic.
It's also Ball Arena. They're
trying to recycle, aren't they?
Yeah, it could be that. Who knows? It's good for the earth.
Yeah, I like looking at those details. I've been wanting to ask someone, but I don't want anybody to look at me and be like, this guy's a weirdo. He was asking us about our glass bottles versus plastic last year. But yeah, that's all I've got for right now. Obviously, the week ahead, I think, is important for the Avalanche,
Mm-hmm.
right? With Arizona, Vancouver, Detroit, and Toronto, a 4-game week. Just important for them to get their confidence back, get that swagger back, and remember who they are as a dominant team in this league, because I think a stretch like that really takes a hit on the morale. But as long as Jesse's telling me that the morale is still high and the Avalanche still believe in themselves, I have a good feeling about this week ahead.
Arizona is struggling right now. I think last time I looked, they lost 7 straight. So if you're going to get back into it, that's maybe a good team. Now, the first home game after a long road trip can sometimes be tough. So
especially at a weird time like 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
right?
So that can be fascinating to watch, but probably the team you want to play coming out of a road trip based on how things are going. And they might be saying the same thing right now, for all I know. Who knows?
That's true. But I feel like in all of professional sports, the Avalanche have to have beaten the Arizona Coyotes at a higher percentage than maybe several matchups that are around. I mean, you hear in the NFL all the time, oh, this team hasn't beaten this team in 7 years. Kind of feels that way with Arizona and Colorado matchups as well.
Arizona's giving them. I'm trying to remember. I was at the game in Arizona earlier this year where they lost in overtime. That was a good game, but I can't remember. I know they played one other time. It's not on the tip of my brain right now, so I can't remember exactly what happened.
Don't expect it to at all.
Arizona was a fun team to watch at the start of the year. I'm interested to
Mm-hmm.
see what has fallen apart for them so far, recently, I would say.
And then Vancouver, while I know the Avalanche are more than capable of beating a team like Vancouver just playing a good style of hockey this year. That it's not going to be a lay-down game, but at least it's at home. And I think, again, it's a team the Avalanche should be capable of taking care of.
I'm going to go talk to my boy, Nikita. I got to go talk to Z. Do you see him do the gritty?
I did not see him do the gritty.
Because they were playing Jake Wallman in Detroit, and he did the gritty after winning the game, so Z pulled the gritty on him, the old reverse.
What do you want to talk to him about?
I just want to talk to him. Like, he's fun to talk to. Like, do you see him? He was like, yeah, I deserve to get suspended. Like, how often do you see players be like, yeah, I deserved it?
Yeah. I don't know.
He's just an interesting guy, that's all.
I agree.
And I'm sure he'll give us another good McKinnon quote.
Many years ago, I asked him if he could dunk, and I don't think he liked that very much. And so ever since then, I don't know if he loved talking to me, but I liked him. He was a cool guy, and I'd be interested to see kind of where he's at in his career, because I think he's definitely a unique Russian, right? And
he's just, like, I think you need more players like him in the NHL who are just fun to talk to, speak their mind, say interesting things. Like, I remember one time I was talking to him, I was asking him, hey, Nolan Pratt, he's been a great coach. Like, do you think he could be a coach, NHL, like a head coach someday? And he thought I was asking him if he could be, if Z wanted to coach, and Z goes, nah, I don't want to coach. That doesn't sound like fun. I would love to be a GM, though, because I'd love to trade people. And I was like, okay, well, that's a decent quote. Not at all what I was asking about, but a good quote. I'll take it. But, like, he's just interesting. I think the NHL needs more guys like that.
No, I agree. He is interesting. And I remember the personality he would bring in the locker room, right? It was always a lot louder, a lot more chatter across the room when he was involved. So,
a lot of yelling.
Yeah, it's definitely a guy I think we miss around here just from a personality standpoint. But that's all we have today, Evan. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to get off your chest before we come back here next Friday while Jesse's coming home from Detroit? You and I are going to be here right in these very seats again.
I thought we were going to talk a little bit about who's the fourth-line center right now.
Okay.
Ryan Johansson. That's a concern moving forward. I guess we can, talk about that another time because it seems like it's going to be an issue moving forward. But I think that's just another issue they got to figure out at this point.
I agree. I don't want to repeat it. But I joined Arif on his podcast over the weekend, and I just had such a great metaphor for Ryan Johansson. I compared him to.
Repeat it.
It's just such a long story.
Okay.
Do you want it?
Yeah.
So about a year and a half ago, I was flipping a house. Inside this house, the previous owners were hoarders, but they were hoarders with valuable things, right? Collectors' things. They would have limited edition DVDs in there. They had a bunch of records that were limited edition. These old school toys from the 70s, right? Like, bubble hockey before they put the bubble on it. I got one of those out of that house. I found a box of hockey cards from the 80s. It had Joe Sakic's rookie card on it, for example. Stuff like that. So I bumped into a closet full of Playboys. And when I found that closet, I'm like, it was like a movie, right? Where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a gold mine. I'm going to be so rich. And I collected all those Playboys, threw them in a box. I'm like, I'm going to sell these and make a lot of money doing it. Only to find out Playboys aren't worth a thing. They're maybe worth $1 an issue. And there I had 12 years of every single edition thinking I was going to make a ton of money, basically just had $1 each year, $12 a year, right? And then I'm like, well, now what? What do I do to get rid of these Playboys? Nobody wants them. Now I just have a stack of boxes that are full of Playboys in my basement.
I see where this is
There's
going.
the comparison to Ryan Johansson. You found something that you thought was going to be an amazing pickup. You thought you found a gold mine. And now
got it for nothing.
Got it for nothing, and now you're stuck with it. And now nobody wants it. Nobody's even going to buy it from you because there's really very little value, and he's proven that this year. So there's my Playboy Ryan Johansson metaphor again. If you
for the new listener, I didn't hear it, so
right.
I thought it was good. But I mean, I wrote that night that after that Florida game, I said, it's a failure at this point. Like you wanted him to be second line center. He's not even centering the third line right now. And that's kind of what's concerning is that the staff they've run out of options of where to put him. So I don't know where this goes from here. He's an awesome guy. Like, I'm interested. He had a nice play on a goal in Washington, I will say that. But it's just, where's the fit?
Right, and there was a moment, I think you and I were even texting about it during that Florida game, where he lost his stick, right? And he was just useless without a stick. He wouldn't come off the ice because obviously he's trying to keep his defensive position. But when you're not moving and you don't have a stick to reach with, you're really not doing much at all out there. So I think that was a glaring moment for me. Like, wow, they got to find something to do with this guy because he's just kind of a detriment at this point.
I know you were trying to end the pod. I feel bad.
No worries.
But it is like that's a big development from this road trip where your second line center is now centering your fourth line because they've run out of options. So I don't know. I guess we'll see how this plays out down the stretch here because we know they're looking to find a center. Whether or not they can find one because the center market is a little crazy right now is another thing, but just something to watch.
And that's where my point was, I saw somebody on Twitter come after me and say, do you think the Avalanche shouldn't do anything at the trade deadline? No, that's not what I'm saying. I know they always do something at the trade deadline. I just think you got to be super cautious about what you're giving up versus what you're getting in just to make a run with this iteration of the Avalanche, right? Which who even knows how much of a run they have in them. So, yeah, I guess with that thought,
we'll end it.
Some Playboy metaphors.
I liked it. I understood it. It was a good one.
Thank you. It came to me when I was just hanging out in my basement looking at these boxes of Playboys. Well, what do I do with these?
We don't need to continue that story.
I won't tell you what happened next. No. Playboys, they're so old school. It's like you open it and you're kind of grossed out.
It has no value. Like, I figured somebody would value those because they're just not around anymore. I don't think.
You think there's people out there that have fetishes for 80s?
Well, no, nudity? I would just think that they hold value because it's a classic thing that some people, they used to be, like, really big.
I was as shocked as you. A lot like Ryan Johansson, right? He used to be a guy that could play in this league, and all of a sudden, nobody wants him. So thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Obviously, we'll be around all week long. Catch Evan's stuff on Colorado Hockey Now. Of course, me and Jesse will be at all morning skates and post games for Guerilla Hockey. So I love the collaborating that we're doing between the two companies. So I hope everybody's following suit and reading Evan's stuff because it is good stuff. So thanks for hanging out with us, Evan.
Yeah,
thanks for hanging out with us, listeners. We'll be back next week. This is Guerilla Hockey.